Happy Days was supposed to be the most wholesome show on television. For 11 seasons, families gathered around the TV and watched Fonzie give his thumbs up. But in August 2022, a single complaint changed everything. Someone noticed something in the very first episode that had been hiding in plain sight since 1974. A joke that aired thousands of times without anyone saying a word. Within weeks, the pilot quietly disappeared from streaming platforms. But what exactly did they say in that opening episode? And why did it take 48 years for anyone to care? It began with Gary Marshall looking around in 1973 and feeling the weight of all the reruns on television. Everywhere he turned, networks were recycling old shows and hoping no one would notice. He wanted something warmer, something that felt like a memory you could step into without feeling silly. He kept thinking about his childhood and the 1950s, a time that was slipping away from living memory. Most executives said nostalgia would never sell because the country was tired and cynical after Vietnam. But he kept pushing. His first attempt aired quietly as a segment of Love, American Style in February 1972. And even though it didn't lead to anything right away, it planted a seed. When American Graffiti blew up in August 1973 and proved people craved retro stories, ABC started listening. Marshall's vision finally took shape, and by January 1974, the network took a chance and greenlit the show as a mid-season replacement. It felt like a second chance for an idea almost everyone had doubted. The show itself came from something older that had almost been forgotten. Back in late 1971, Marshall had filmed an unsold pilot called New Family in Town. It had Harold Gould as Howard, Marion Ross as Marion, Ron Howard as Richie, Anson Williams as Potsy, Rick Carrot as Chuck, and Susan Neer as Joni. The story followed the Cunninghams' move to Milwaukee and revolved around their first television set, and Richie trying to impress girls. ABC rejected it, but no one wanted to give up on it completely. To save money, Marshall changed everything. Instead of filming outside, which cost too much, they shot inside with a 3-camera setup and a live audience. That shift gave the show a brighter rhythm and made the humor feel quicker. It also made production faster and cheaper. What started as a discarded pilot slowly turned into one of the most popular series of the 1970s. Fonzie didn't even exist in the original version. Marshall didn't want greasers at all, but after American Graffiti became a hit in 1973, executives asked for tougher characters like the pharaohs in the movie. Marshall compromised and created Fonzie, a quiet dropout who lived on the other side of town. He was supposed to say a few lines and stay in the background. During auditions, Henry Winkler walked in thinking he had no chance because Marshall originally imagined a tall, blonde Italian model type. Winkler read the lines differently, almost holding back instead of playing obvious coolness. He even refused to comb his hair when the script said he should. That small instinct made Marshall stop. By the time they did table reads, Winkler's presence kept stealing focus without even trying. By season 2, his character had become so popular that producers briefly thought about renaming the whole show. What began as a minor role became the heart of the series. Ron Howard entered the story with the kind of familiarity audiences already trusted. He was only 19 when Marshall cast him as Richie Cunningham in 1974. Marshall remembered him as Opie in The Andy Griffith Show and wanted someone who could carry innocence without seeming weak. Howard had already worked for years as a child actor, but this role asked him to grow from teenager to adult right in front of viewers. He stayed on the show through 170 episodes from 1974 to 1980 before Richie enlisted in the Army and later married Lori Beth in a phone wedding. That exit helped clear the path for Howard's directing future. something Marshall had always suspected would happen. Marion Ross brought a completely different energy. She had done years of supporting roles and walked into the audition wanting something steady. She pretended to bake cookies while chaos swirled around her, and everyone in the room instantly saw Mrs. Cunningham take shape. She played the role for all 255 episodes from 1974 to 1984. Fans kept approaching her for decades afterward, telling her she reminded them of their own mothers. She carried that warmth everywhere she went and protected the character's legacy fiercely. Anson Williams arrived as Potsy Weber in a way no one expected. His car broke down on the way to the audition in 1974, and he showed up late and drenched from the rain. Instead of panicking, he pulled out a harmonica and started performing doo-wop from the 1950s. That moment set him apart from more than 200 other actors. His musical background became a running piece of the show, often leading him into awkward and funny serenade scenes. He stayed for 222 episodes and built a reputation as a reliable comic presence. Don Most fought through exhausting audition rounds for Ralph Malph. He played with deadpan humor during improvisation and kept delivering strange little jokes that made the casting team remember him. Robbie Benson had been a serious contender, but Most captured something delightfully odd. He stayed for 170 episodes from 1974 to 1984. He almost walked away from the role at one point because the auditions were so intense, but his agent urged him to try one more time. That final callback changed his life. Henry Winkler's full transformation into Fonzie took even more persistence. He went through over 100 auditions before landing the role. At his final read, he rode a real motorcycle onto the stage wearing a leather jacket, and finished with the softest version of Aye anyone had ever heard. He later admitted he was terrified of motorcycles. He proved it by crashing on the soundstage after riding one for only 17 seconds. Despite that, he played Fonzie in all 255 episodes and became the show's breakout legend. By the time Happy Days premiered on January 15, 1974, at 8:12 p.m., ABC had no idea how powerful the reaction would be. The pilot episode all the way brought in 15,000 viewers and competed head-to-head with All in the Family on CBS. ABC had been struggling to fill the Tuesday slot after canceling Temperatures Rising, so this win felt like a shockwave. Kids across the country started doing Fonzie's thumbs up at school, and the cast suddenly found themselves representing a version of the 1950s that people wanted badly to believe in. The night the show premiered, a cultural shift began without anyone realizing how big it would become. Season 1 kept pushing upward. Between January and May 1974, the show averaged a Nielsen rating of 20.0 and became the third most watched show in America. Fonzie's early popularity fueled everything. Leather jackets sold out in certain cities. Motorcycle sales ticked upward. Lunchboxes, T-shirts, and comic books spread across the country. ABC kept the Tuesday 8:00 p.m. slot for 10 years. The early momentum set the foundation for the spin-off empire that followed. By the 1974-75 season, Happy Days hit the #1 spot with a 25.9 share. ABC leaned fully into Fonzie's coolness, highlighting him in promotions. Episodes centered on him gained as much as 30% more viewers. Even CBS tried to sabotage the momentum by putting Good Times in the same slot, but the rivalry only pushed Happy Days higher. When Penny Marshall made her guest appearance as Laverne DeFazio, the audience response was so strong that it launched Laverne and Shirley. The entire landscape of ABC comedy started shifting around this single show. Then came the moment that would follow the series forever. On September 20, 1977, Fonzie jumped over a shark while water skiing during the Hollywood Story arc. He wore a leather jacket and white shorts, and the image stuck so deeply in pop culture that it created a whole phrase. Jumping the shark became a way to describe when a show goes too far to stay exciting. That night, though, the stunt pulled in 30,000 viewers and earned a share above 50. It marked the highest peak of the show's popularity. People talked about it everywhere, and even today the moment still defines how audiences look at the limits of creativity on television. The show continued to dominate through the late 1970s and early 1980s. It ended on July 19, 1984, after 11 seasons and 255 episodes. By 1980, syndication had earned over $100,000, and reruns kept the show alive for generations. Winkler had negotiated a smaller salary in exchange for a share of syndication profits, a move that made him a multimillionaire. Happy Days became one of the most profitable sitcoms ever created. Despite all the warmth the show brought, the very first episode carried controversy that people didn't fully see at the time. All the Way, the pilot that aired on January 15, 1974, centered around Richie being encouraged by Potsy and Ralph to move fast with Mary Lou Milligan, a girl they believed had a wild reputation. Potsy even showed Richie how to unhook a bra, and Richie later lied about what happened. The episode pushed boundaries and quietly normalized peer pressure and sexual expectations. At the time, these choices passed as harmless. Later viewers saw how deeply troubling some of it really was. Mary Lou herself became a symbol of the way girls were portrayed in early television. She was spoken about as if she were an easy target, someone whose value was linked only to her supposed reputation. The way the boys talked about her mirrored attitudes that were common in the 1970s, but the effect lingered far into the future. Critics often return to this episode as an example of how women were objectified on screen in ways people no longer tolerate. A small subplot made things even more uncomfortable. Mary Lou casually mentioned that her gym teacher grabbed her sweater. The show treated it like a joke. Richie didn't react with concern, and the scene moved on without acknowledging the seriousness of such a moment. It aired during a time when many kids watched the show after school, and that detail has since been criticized heavily for normalizing harassment and making light of assault. In August 2022, when a Canadian broadcaster aired the episode again, it sparked complaints. Viewers argued that the scene encouraged sexist thinking and trivialized assault. One viewer demanded the episode be removed permanently, calling the content harmful both then and now. The backlash forced a conversation about how older shows should handle sensitive material when replayed for new audiences. The Canadian Broadcast Standards Council reviewed the complaint. They concluded that the episode did not break broadcasting rules because Richie ultimately resisted pressure and told the truth. Still, they acknowledged that parts of the episode reflected sexist thinking that no longer aligned with modern standards. Even though the episode was cleared, it quietly disappeared from most streaming platforms. That absence became part of its legacy, a reminder that nostalgia often hides things that need to be re-examined when they resurface years later. The story begins quietly and then keeps rolling forward without warning. Back in the early days of Happy Days, the pilot episode titled All the Way aired on January 15, 1974, and at the time, it slipped past almost everyone without a second thought. In the closing moments, Richie and Potsy joke about an indigenous character, using the word Eskimo as a punchline and laughing about a snowball being thrown to start the World Series. There was no pause, no awareness, and no signal that the joke carried weight. It was filmed on January 22, 1974, during a period when 1970s sitcoms often leaned on stereotypes to get cheap laughs. For decades, that scene sat untouched, replayed, and forgotten, until views changed and memory caught up. In 2022, someone finally noticed, and a complaint brought the moment back into the light, forcing people to ask how something like that ever passed as harmless. That question grew louder on August 22, 2022, when the same pilot aired on CHCHDT at 5:30 p.m. with no warning at all. No advisory appeared on screen. Nothing prepared viewers for the outdated language or the tone of the jokes. A viewer filed a complaint the very next day, arguing that if stations warn audiences about sexual material, they should also warn them about racial content. The complaint pointed directly at the Eskimo joke and the way it normalized harmful ideas without challenge. The station responded, but the episode was not pulled right away. Gary Marshall later spoke openly about the pilot, admitting it pushed the edges of comedy at the time. He described the humor as awkward teenage jokes meant to reflect the era, not to harm. He acknowledged that certain scenes do not age well, especially the Eskimo joke, but maintained there was no bad intent behind it. His comments revealed how quickly cultural lines can shift and how shows created for one moment can feel very different decades later. That tension carried into later seasons too. In 1982, an episode titled Southern Crossing tried to tackle racism head-on, but it did so in a way that sparked new criticism. Fonzie, Al, and Chachi travel south after seeing a news report of a black man being beaten at a lunch counter in 1957, an image clearly echoing the real violence seen during the civil rights era. Inside a segregated diner, a black waitress named May is told she cannot serve white customers. Fonzie responds by knocking a whites-only sign off the wall and fighting a group of racist patrons who surrender almost instantly. In a few minutes of screen time, racism seems solved. The moment is loud and dramatic, but also unsettling. It turns a deep, brutal struggle into something that ends with one punch and a clean victory. What gives the scene more weight is May herself. For years, she had been quiet and overlooked, and suddenly she becomes the one who takes the real risk. She serves an interracial group and defies her boss, knowing the cost could be severe. In that moment, she is the true voice of change, not Fonzie. The writers wanted to show that courage comes from those who live inside the injustice, but the limits of a sitcom left her story thin. Even so, her stand mattered. For many viewers, it was rare to see a black character with agency on a mostly white show, and that brief moment stayed with them. Still, critics argue the episode softened history. Real activists did not face instant surrender. They faced beatings, prison, and death. Some praise the episode for even trying to address racism in a mainstream sitcom, while others see it as a fantasy that centers a white hero too easily. The clip continues to circulate online, keeping the argument alive, especially since it is missing from many official streaming platforms. Years later, another fight erupted, this time off-screen. In April 2011, 5 main cast members filed a $10,000 lawsuit against CBS and Paramount. Anson Williams, Marion Ross, Don Most, Aaron Moran, and the estate of Tom Bosley claimed they were cheated out of syndication and merchandise royalties from the show's 1974 to 1984 run, which had generated over $100,000. Their contracts promised percentages of net profits, but the studios allegedly deducted a 50% handling fee and paid only about $9,000 per actor in recent years. Meanwhile, Happy Days merchandise kept selling, from lunchboxes to slot machines. The lawsuit accused executives of hiding profits, while some actors struggled just to get by. Henry Winkler stood apart from the rest. He had negotiated his own separate merchandising deals and earned millions from Fonzie jackets, dolls, and memorabilia. In 2021, one of his original leather jackets sold at auction for between $75,000 and $8,700, with multiple items bringing in more than $150,000 total. His full Fonzie wardrobe was estimated at $50,000 to $80,000. Other cast members watched this from a distance. Don most openly called the situation unfair, saying the imbalance had been obvious for years. In June 2012, the court dismissed the fraud claims, but allowed the breach of contract case to move forward. The judge ruled the actors could pursue unpaid merchandising revenue, including DVD sales. Ron Howard testified that Winkler understood the merchandising landscape deeply, a detail that strained old friendships and fed the narrative of broke stars from a hit show. CBS admitted to oversights but denied wrongdoing, pushing back against the $10,000 figure. When the final episode of Happy Days aired on May 8, 1984, it felt like a clean goodbye at first. The last scene slowed everything down and let it breathe. And then Tom Bosley, standing as Mr. Cunningham, looked straight into the camera and thanked the audience for being part of the family. The words landed softly, but behind the scenes they hit like an explosion. Gary Marshall knew exactly what he was doing, and ABC executives knew it too. They hated it. Breaking the fourth wall was considered almost unforgivable at the time, something that shattered the safety of a fictional world that had run for 10 years. Still, Marshall pushed forward, convinced viewers deserved closure. That night, nearly 30,000 people watched. And while fans felt moved and strangely comforted, network executives reacted immediately, calling it unacceptable and even hinting it crossed contractual lines. What aired as warmth on screen triggered anger in the offices upstairs. What made things worse was what happened next. After that emotional goodbye, ABC did something almost no one expected. Because of schedule disruptions caused by the 1984 Winter Olympics, the network still had unaired episodes sitting on the shelf. Instead of letting the finale stand as the final word, they aired 5 leftover episodes across the summer and into September. For viewers, it felt like emotional whiplash. One week, the family had said goodbye forever, and then suddenly the show was back as if nothing had happened. Fans felt confused and even betrayed, as if the meaning of the finale had been quietly undone. The backlash was strong enough that television contracts quietly changed afterward to make sure finales would truly be final. To this day, those episodes are often ignored in retrospectives, treated like they never existed. That ending almost never happened at all. Gary Marshall had been fighting creative battles with ABC since the early years, and the finale speech became one of the biggest. Executives warned him repeatedly that directly addressing viewers broke long-standing television rules. Marshall argued that the show had always been about family, and that families say goodbye face to face. The argument dragged on for months, with Marshall even threatening to walk away if the moment was cut. Eventually, ABC agreed, but only after he promised it would never happen again. That tension never really faded. It shaped the later seasons, affected casting choices, and kept Marshall constantly pushing back against interference. The finale ended up defining the show's legacy not because it was perfect, but because it revealed how hard its creator fought to protect its heart. Even with 30,000 viewers, the finale did not escape criticism. Many fans felt the emotional beats were forced, especially the sudden conflict between Fonzie and Richie. The feud was written to explain Richie's departure, but it landed awkwardly. Ron Howard had already been uneasy for years, especially when executives floated the idea of renaming the series to focus on Fonzie alone. He feared the ensemble would collapse, and he was not wrong. The tension between the characters mirrored real anxiety behind the scenes, and for some viewers, it felt like the show was straining to create drama it no longer needed. After the finale, ratings never recovered, and the sense of momentum was gone for good. Long before the ending, the show had already left a permanent mark on pop culture, with a single moment that refused to fade. On September 20th, 1977, a Season 5 episode titled Hollywood Part 3 aired a scene that would follow television forever. Fonzie, wearing his leather jacket, water-skied over a confined shark. The stunt was designed to show off Henry Winkler's real-life skill, but it came off as ridiculous. Years later, in 1985, radio personality John Hine and his roommate gave that moment a name. They called it jumping the shark. The phrase spread quickly and became shorthand for the exact moment a show goes too far trying to stay relevant. In 2009, it officially entered the Oxford English Dictionary, forever tying Happy Days to a warning about creative decline. Behind the cheerful image, darker stories slowly surfaced. During filming of a bra scene in the first season, several female extras later claimed they experienced sexual harassment from male crew members. According to a 2025 5-video expose, the women described inappropriate comments, pressure, and unwanted attention, followed by silence when complaints were raised. The claims suggested ABC buried the issue to protect the show's wholesome reputation, and that speaking up came with threats to future careers. For fans who grew up seeing the show as safe and comforting, the revelations were deeply unsettling and reopened conversations about what was tolerated in classic television sets. Creative tension also shaped relationships on camera. As Fonzie became more popular, Henry Winkler's presence grew, and Ron Howard quietly struggled with his own ambitions. Howard wanted to direct, but opportunities were limited while the focus stayed locked on Fonzie. When executives suggested renaming the show, Howard seriously considered leaving. Gary Marshall stepped in, and the title stayed, but the imbalance lingered. Years later, everything shifted when Howard directed Night Shift in 1982. Winkler supported him fully, and the rivalry softened into mutual respect. What started as quiet resentment turned into mentorship, and both men grew beyond the roles that had once boxed them in. Some characters simply vanished. Chuck Cunningham, Richie's older brother, disappeared midway through Season 2 without explanation. Fans invented wild theories, but the truth was simpler. Actor Gavin O'Herlihy left due to creative differences, the role was briefly recast, and then erased entirely. Gary Marshall later admitted it was an experiment to see if viewers would accept a character disappearing without comment. They did. Ratings held steady, and soon most people forgot Chuck had ever existed. The moment became so famous it earned a name of its own, Chuck Cunningham Syndrome. Not every experiment failed. Penny Marshall's guest appearance as Laverne DeFazio led directly to Laverne and Shirley, one of the biggest sitcom hits of its era. At the same time, another spin-off, Blansky's Beauties, premiered in January 1977 and collapsed within a month. Critics disliked the tone, viewers stayed away, and the show vanished almost instantly. It became a quiet reminder that success could not be copied on command. Then came a moment that changed television forever. In 1978, an episode titled My Favorite Orkin introduced an alien named Mork. Robin Williams walked on screen and rewrote the rules of sitcom comedy in minutes. 4 days later, he had a contract. Mork and Mindy exploded in popularity, pulling in around 20,000 viewers per episode and peaking at nearly 60,000 for its 1982 finale. The success encouraged wilder storytelling and proved that one guest appearance could reshape careers overnight. Decades later, the legacy kept growing. Happy Days aired from 1974 to 1984 and produced 4 spin-offs. Laverne and Shirley became the highest-rated show on television during its peak years, pulling more than 30,000 viewers per episode. Reruns earned over $100,000 in syndication, airing worldwide for decades. Some episodes were later edited due to outdated stereotypes, but the show's influence never faded. In 2024, Ron Howard and Henry Winkler reunited at the Emmys to celebrate the 50th anniversary, standing on a recreated diner set and laughing like time had folded in on itself. It reminded audiences why the show mattered, imperfections and all. In his memoir, Gary Marshall admitted the series worked because it sold nostalgia during a time when television was losing its footing. He believed people wanted comfort, even if that comfort hid pressure, conflict, and compromise behind the scenes. Happy Days became more than a sitcom. It became a mirror of optimism layered over struggle. And that tension is exactly why people still talk about it.